business leaders, scientists, researchers, youth, and civil society representatives from around the world. Ladies and gentlemen, for years, our development has primarily been driven by land-based resources. Obviously, this has not fully delivered the desired development goals. Inspired by the need to accelerate the achievement of the SDGs and called upon by our President Uhuru Kenyatta to respond, Kenya, Canada, and Japan decided to host this conference. We are grateful for this partnership, and to those who joined us as co-sponsors or participants, we also extend our gratitude. Excellencies, our oceans, seas, lakes, and rivers are natural capital that we can tap into in order to accelerate economic growth, in order to create jobs, and to fight against poverty. They also provide an avenue for addressing challenges such as climate change, pollution, and ecological degradation. Therefore, over the next 3 days, we shall have strategic engagements on the promotion of production and conservation sides of these resources. To realize this vision, we will identify the priorities, opportunities, and challenges in the blue economy. We will also focus on financing, technologies, and innovations, on capacity building, and the involvement of women and youth in the blue economy. The program for this conference is complex, but we are confident that we shall all navigate it. At the end of the conference, we shall present for your consideration the Nairobi Statement of Intent on Advancing a Sustainable Blue Economy, which will highlight the key messages from this meeting. We shall also highlight commitments made by the various stakeholders in the different sectors of the blue economy. I now wish to invite His Excellency Jonathan Wilkinson, my colleague, the Minister of Fisheries, Oceans, and the Canadian Coast Guard, to make his welcome remarks to this conference. Minister.
Good morning, President Kenyatta, Your Excellencies, fellow ministers, and delegates. On behalf of the Government of Canada and Prime Minister Trudeau, I would very much like to thank President Kenyatta for convening this Sustainable Blue Economy Conference, the first of its kind. Canada has been very much honored to be working with the Government of Kenya as a co-host for this conference, along with the Government of Japan. A blue economy and values of inclusion, sustainability, and economic progress and security all go hand in hand. Your presence at this conference underscores the extent to which we all share these values. Cette conférence a réuni des entreprises, des universités.
This conference has brought together companies, universities, and governments from all over the world. This conference will allow global and regional organizations and also regional economic communities, youth, farm, and indigenous communities for more than 50 developing countries and developed countries to come together and create important pathways for the future.
To build a sustainable blue economy, one that leaves no one behind. Like all of you, Canada has a lot at stake. Our ocean economy, or our blue economy, accounts for about $36 billion in gross domestic product and 350,000 jobs in fisheries, aquaculture, energy, shipping, tourism, and recreation. A blue economy that takes advantage of the latest innovations, science, and best practices can help to build prosperity for all. But we must manage our water resources wisely, restore what has been lost, and build protections to ensure that society and future generations will benefit from an inclusive, prosperous, and sustainable blue economy.
The key to success is our willingness to work in a true spirit of collaboration with others.
It is critical because issues as complex as the health and sustainability of our oceans requires an all-hands-on-deck approach. No one actor can solve these issues alone, which is why we greatly value what others bring to the table. Through listening to each other and combining our collective knowledge, we can all enhance our decision-making and move our states forward. We very much look forward to the conversations that will happen over the coming 3 days, and we certainly congratulate Kenya on putting together this very important conference.
Thank you, Honourable Ministers, for the warm welcome. The next speaker is Mr. Keriako Tobiko, Cabinet Secretary for Environment and Forestry of the Republic of Kenya. Mr. Tobiko will draw attention to the challenge of striking the balance between conservation and production in harnessing the potential of the blue economy. Welcome, sir.
Excellencies, heads of states and government, ministers and heads of delegations, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. For far too long, the environment sector has been struggling against the active onslaught on natural ecosystems by productive and human activities that ordinarily support economic development. Those of us in the environment sector have always struggled to lead the cause of environmental conservation in isolation to what goes on in the economic sector. However, we have come to realize that this is not a viable proposition. I believe there is a huge scope for synergy between those of us who champion environmental conservation on the one hand and those of the productive sector on the other. Indeed, sustainable economic activities and conservation of the environment are mutually reinforcing. As the world population grows towards the 9 billion mark by 2050, the demand for resources is also increasing exponentially. All nations have no choice but to think of new and innovative approaches that can meet the soaring demands for human needs, including food, shelter, and healthcare. This conference is about how we protect the environment and how we maintain viable ecosystems. Waste management, pollution control, as well as the fight against climate change are at the core of these efforts. As the ministry responsible for the stewardship of environment, forestry, climate change, and meteorological services in Kenya, we are committed to providing the leadership needed to ensure that conservation positively reinforces economic growth and development. We have taken bold decisions to ban single-use plastic carry bags and instituted strict extended producer responsibility for PET bottles. An illustration of this positive reinforcement of conservation and blue carbon economic activities is evident along our coastline, where communities have come together to plant mangroves, exploit seaweed farming, develop greater open sea fishing capabilities, and enjoy the benefits of seaside tourism. Some of these communities are benefiting from the sale of value-added seaweed products, while others like Mikoko Pamoja are benefiting from carbon credit. And because what affects the ocean and seas goes beyond what happens in the waters and includes most of the land-based activities, we are restoring water catchment areas and undertaking cleanup, massive cleanup and restoration of our urban rivers in order to minimize pollutants washing into the oceans. The actions are all about ensuring that blue resources continue to boost our economic growth, tackle unemployment, and address poverty. Clearly, promoting economic activities, social inclusion, conservation of the environment are imperative for sustainable development. This conference is therefore an ideal opportunity for us to have strategic conversations around these issues and to forge a holistic strategy moving forward. I thank you for listening and wish you fruitful deliberation. Thank you so much.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, coming up now is a video of the blue economy highlighting the theme Cities, Tourism, Resilient Coast and Infrastructure. Enjoy. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I now invite Mr. Parveen Sukhdev and Mr. Justin Mundy. Mr. Parveen Sukhdev is the president of the Worldwide Fund International and World Goodwill Champion to the United Nations Environment Programme. He is an environment economist and a thought leader on sustainability. Mr. Justin Mundy is a senior fellow and special envoy for the World Resources Institute's Conflict and Natural Resources and Sustainable Oceans Initiative. They will elaborate on the importance of the blue economy and its two main pillars of productivity and sustainability. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Sukhdev and Mr. Mundy.
Your Excellency President Kenyatta, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I begin with our thanks from Justin and myself to the government of Kenya and also to the governments of Canada and Japan for having hosted this extraordinary conference. When we talk of the ocean, Justin and I think of it as a combination of many themes. There is an ocean of benefits, there is also an ocean of risks, and there is an ocean of opportunities before us. So Justin, what do you think of some of the key benefits that the ocean delivers to us, society and the economy?
Thank you. And Your Excellencies, President Kenyatta, thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to speak to you this morning. I think as the excellent presentations have already indicated, and indeed the excellent films have just illustrated, we are, so many of us, deeply affected by the coast. Indeed, 3.2 billion of us live within 100 kilometers of the sea, which is a very large amount of global GDP. Protein is, of course, essential for our diets, and fish provide a significant amount of animal protein for 3 billion people. And, of course, the sea is absolutely essential in our ability to find a way of creating an equilibrium for climate change, as half the oxygen that we breathe, every other breath that we take, is actually produced by the ocean. And indeed, in terms of the broader economic values, an astonishing 90% of global trade volume and 40% of global trade value rest deposits move across the ocean, and that is set to increase by 4 times by 2050.
And it doesn't stop there. If you look at livelihoods and employment, the heart of why we have our economies, 60 million are directly employed by fisheries and a couple of 100 million indirectly. And not only that, but coral reefs and mangroves, which are really the nurseries of fish, provide livelihoods for over 500 million people. Now, without these livelihoods, given that they are for relatively poor coastal communities, we would not be able to dream of achieving SDG 2 on food security,
or indeed SDG number 8 on decent livelihoods and work. Justin talked about climate, and climate mitigation benefits of the oceans are actually a double-edged sword, because whilst 30% of our emissions are being absorbed by the ocean, and indeed 90% of the excess heat, but unfortunately this silent job that the ocean performs, the great mitigation task, has its risks. And we begin with the first of the risks, which is ocean acidification. Essentially, the absorption of carbon dioxide leads to the formation of carbolic acid, which reduces the alkalinity of the oceans, which in turn inhibits the formation of aragonite, which is a calcium substrate, which is the basis for coral reefs. So it reduces the resilience of the very reefs, which are providing so much in terms of fish nurseries and livelihoods. We have to be careful and watchful, because less than 20% of our reefs are actually resilient in a real way, and almost 80% of that are in developing countries. So our first focus has to be to identify those and to do what we can to conserve them for the benefit of the local communities. But talking of fisheries, Justin, there's more there, right?
Well, there is more, but also we are, I think, coming to something of an existential challenge when it comes to the fisheries. We have assumed, it seems, that we can always just go out and fish and the fish will be there. But now, as we know, 33% of fisheries are overexploited and 60% have been exploited to their maximum value. The fishing industry does give us $190 billion worth of value every year. However, they are mismanaged appallingly, with $80 billion going to waste and are lost. And the problem we have is that not only are we overfishing, but also the underlying drivers of a viable habitat for the fish are being destroyed at the same time. We cannot assume that if we destroy the habitat of the oceans, that the fish are going to be there for us. And this, as Pavel has said, not only includes, of course, the coral reefs, which are essential, but also mangroves. And those two bits of natural capital, if you wish, both the coral reefs and the mangroves, are absolutely essential for our coastal defenses as well. The coral reefs take away 97% of incoming wave energy, absolutely essential in the moment of increasing storms and hurricanes. And of course, mangroves significantly dampen wave height. They take away 67% of wave height. This at a time we realized when coral reefs are declining and we have taken away a very large number of our mangroves.
And if that weren't enough, unfortunately, we are polluting the oceans with plastic. You'll notice that we are not using the plastic bottles that we have here. But there's something like 8 million tons of plastic mismanaged waste that enters the ocean, large items, bottles, etc. Another 2 million tons enters as microplastics. And all of these, which means including waste from car tires and washing machines and so on. All of this eventually ends up in the intestines and stomachs of us, because we eat the fish which have eaten up these plastics. In some parts of West Africa, along the coastline, 50% of the catch is plastic. And the challenges, the risks that I describe, actually extend to the deltas, because one of the biggest problems that we are facing is that the deltas around the world are shrinking and sinking, because a lot of water and a lot of silt has been withheld by the hydropower dams that have been built upstream. These include the Gangetic Delta and the Mekong. These are among the largest. Coastal agriculture is hit very severely when this happens because of productivity losses. And at the same time, salinization, as a result of the ingress of salt water from the tidal action, destroys those environments. So the absence of silt is a big problem. And the shrinking of deltas, which in fact is also happening on shore. It's also one of the results why we have Lake Victoria, which has a problem with drying up. The notion, I think, that hydropower is the default option for renewable energy needs to be rethought. And today, fortunately, we have options. If we look at solar, grid solar projects are being built today in sizes of over a gigawatt at less than $1 million per megawatt. These are unheard of prices. Power supply from these power purchase agreements are being struck right now at less than 5 cents per kilowatt hour. This is less than half the rate of 10 cents and 8 cents that we were hearing as much as a year or two ago. So we have options now, and it's important to look at these. Otherwise, we have the problem of potentially stranded assets, not just in oil, but also in hydropower. Indeed, in Europe, some hydropower dams have begun to be dismantled. I think it's important for us to look also at the opportunities. It is, after all, an ocean of opportunities. To see that there are numerous ways in which we can first recognize, and that is important, and value natural capital. Today, companies may report balance sheets and their assets, but countries do not report the wealth that is in the 200-mile exclusive economic zones around their territories. Neither does the world generally look at the wealth, the public wealth that is in the oceans when we start planning international agreements and policies. That needs to change, Justin. I think natural capital accounting at the national level has to begin.
I think it's essential, and I think, as we said 10 years ago, it's a great pity to waste a good crisis. And we do now have a pretty significant crisis, as we have outlined, in terms of the sustainability of our natural capital. We have been assuming that the agreement that we managed to reach in Paris a few years ago, hoping to keep to 1.5 degrees, was somehow going to be a comfortable landing place. We know that this is indeed now not the case from the recent IPCC report, which came out a month ago. One of the conclusions of if we keep to 1.5 degrees is that we are likely to lose at least 70 to 90% of our coral reefs. So even if we are successful, we are going to lose 70 to 90% of our coral reefs. That is a catastrophe for the ocean and the blue economy. It also means, of course, that as we look at economic growth, the opportunity to take renewable energy is a luxury which we cannot afford not to take. Because we will actually get through our carbon budget to get to 2 degrees, not 1.5 degrees, by 2036. So any oil and gas project which is assuming a long life of 50 to 60 years is almost by definition a stranded asset. And that means that the opportunity to move further is extremely important. Not least of all because if you take Johan Rockström's brilliant carbon law, reducing carbon emissions by 50% every decade, a healthy ocean is absolutely critical to that in order to sequester the carbon which we put up in the atmosphere. It also means that we need to recognize of the $90 trillion going into infrastructure over the next 20 years, 65% of that is likely to be on the coast. All of that should be zero carbon by 2050, and all of that should have a minimum impact in terms of waste and sewage and plastics. It also means, of course, that there is a requirement to take the opportunity of building new financial approaches, new infrastructure financing structures. We are very lucky that there have been a number of countries, not least Palau, Seychelles, Maldives, Fiji, Cook Islands, and others, who have actually taken the leadership in helping to develop these. And we should be very much grateful for their actions and very much in their debt for taking this stance.
Absolutely, and I think the point you make about infrastructure applies equally well not just to man-made infrastructure, but also ecological infrastructure. After all, the mangroves are ecological infrastructure. They value the value they deliver in terms of storm and cyclone protection, and the saving they generate as a result of that can be worked out in the climate issues that we had addressed way back in Copenhagen. Mangroves and seagrasses and the plantation of these and the generation of coastal defenses through rebuilding coral reefs had returns on investment upwards of 20, 40, even 60% in some cases. On the flip side, of course, we have perverse subsidies. Today, our finance system is such that there's almost $4 billion of high seas fishing subsidies, which are doing much damage, but only resulting in generating about 2.4% of the seafood that we could literally double the economic benefit if we got this right. But there's other opportunities. Do you want to talk about a few of these?
Well, thank you, Bowen. Very briefly, we'll end here. That it's perhaps important now to understand that the challenge before us, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, is to build a process that concentrates on ocean regeneration. We have abused it and over-utilized the ocean for far too long. We now need to regenerate it and restore it. And for that, we need regenerative finance. Regenerative finance, which uses blended finance and looks at local communities, and as has been said, embraces inclusion as a pre-tenet. We also need to find a way of ensuring that the EEZs around our shores are managed properly, and also that we have enough marine protected areas. I should acknowledge the great work of the UN Special Envoy Peter Thompson here, who is always saying, very rightly, that of course we need 10% of the MPAs by 2020. We're probably at somewhere between 4 and 7. There are those who now say we need 30% by 2030 to have any hope of really ensuring that our fisheries can be regenerated. We need to embrace new technologies, new jobs, a circular economy. We also should very much acknowledge the great work of Dame Ellen MacArthur and her foundation in coming up with 3 pillars to eliminate, innovate and circulate plastics recovery and recycling. But also, if I may, I would like to end on a bit on the heavy finance. There is now an expectation from asset managers that serious institutional investors are going to take this risk seriously. The Task Force for Climate Disclosure now has over 500 members who are evaluating, monetizing the climate risk, and that their investments are going to be based upon those criteria. This is at the moment voluntary, but is likely to become mandatory. We also need to recognize the great work of UN PRI, which has $70 trillion of investors who are willing to, and only now wish to, look at both the environmental and the economic benefit of our investments. And here I'd also like to acknowledge the great work of European Commissioner Carmen Vela, who he and I are working together and putting together the blue economy finance principles to give the private sector some sort of framework that we need to look at.
Centered on SDG 14, which I'm delighted, because finally that really has to be the purpose of the blue economy.
It must be. And we also need to recognize that the rating agencies, those who actually determine the cost of capital around the world, are now looking at how countries implement their NDCs, their national climate commitments, because these will expand to include the blue economy. And they are rating agencies now looking at both the country risk and the private sector credit risk in countries. And this will have a huge impact on our ability to generate the finance that we need for this regenerative finance in order to regenerate our ocean. So if I may, Your Excellency, President Kenyatta, Excellencies, Head of State, friends, colleagues, we have perhaps the most significant challenge of our lives here as we go from the Holocene to the Anthropocene into a completely uncharted territory. We have to ask ourselves, to paraphrase Gandhi, that we may perhaps be able to be the change that we want, but do we have the courage and the leadership to be the change that we need? In looking at our distinguished colleagues here today, I'm sure that the answer is yes, and that this will be articulated well and clearly over the next 3 days. Your Excellencies, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pavin Sukhdev and Mr. Justin Mandri. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we will now have a video highlighting the 2 pillars of the Blue Economy Conference: productivity and sustainability. Enjoy.
The blue economy is basically about bringing together the challenge that we're facing with sustaining the health of the oceans, the health of our lakes and the health of our rivers, and at the same time ensuring that we're enjoying the maximum opportunities that are presented by the seas, by the oceans, by the lakes and by the rivers to grow our economies and to create greater prosperity. Is about bringing together the challenge of marine conservation, the challenge of dealing with pollution, the challenge of regaining the health of our oceans, the challenge of managing climate change as it relates to the seas and the oceans, and at the same time ensuring that we are building a great economy for our world that creates greater prosperity for our people. It is bringing together these 2 pillars so that we can have greater prosperity.
favorable climatic conditions for all of us, but also provide enormous value in the form of the blue economy that can be tapped to help accelerate economic growth and fight poverty in many of our nations.
It is His Excellency the President who has recognized that we have not been able to maximize the opportunities for our country, for our people, for our environment that have been brought about by the fact that Kenya is blessed with having the seas, over 1,000 kilometers of sea-facing land and cities and populations, millions of people living along our lake regions and our rivers, and yet we have not been able to maximize the opportunities presented by these enormous and greatly rich water sources for our economy and for our people. Welcome to the Sustainable Blue Economy Conference in Nairobi, Kenya. It is your opportunity to make your contribution to make this a more prosperous world while making sure we protect our planet.
Excellencies, honorable ministers, distinguished heads of delegation, ladies and gentlemen, I now wish to invite back on stage Ambassador Monica Juma, Cabinet Secretary for Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Kenya, to introduce the Leaders' Commitment segment. Thereafter, she'll invite His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta, the President of the Republic of Kenya, to deliver Kenya's statement of commitment to the sustainable blue economy. Karibu.
Your Excellencies, heads of state and government, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce the Leaders' Commitment segment of the Sustainable Blue Economy Conference. Throughout this segment, leaders representing various countries and organizations will have an opportunity to make their pledges and commitments towards the sustainable utilization of our blue economy resources for accelerated economic growth. These commitments and pledges will form the basis upon which we shall hold ourselves accountable. They will also guide our path towards the realization of a sustainable blue economy and set the standard for evaluating our success in achieving our set objectives. To start us off in this segment, it is my pleasure to introduce the convener of this conference, His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta of the Republic of Kenya. His Excellency President Kenyatta has demonstrated his commitment and leadership towards the sustainable growth of the blue economy. He has inspired Kenya, the continent, and indeed the world to focus on the immense opportunities for accelerating economic growth by sustainably harnessing the resources found in our oceans, lakes, seas, and rivers to fight poverty, hunger, and poor health. He has also been at the forefront in the mobilization of resources for investment in the blue economy, business, and development sectors. The convening of this conference on his own initiative is a demonstration of President Kenyatta's determination to provide national and global leadership and focus on enhancing the blue economy resources sustainably. It therefore gives me great pleasure to welcome His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta to deliver his welcoming remarks and make his commitment towards the realization of our aspirations to sustainably grow the blue economy. Your Excellency, sir.
Your Excellencies, heads of state and government, honorable ministers, heads of delegations, our generous co-hosts for this first ever Global Conference on Sustainable Blue Economy, the governments of Canada and Japan, all our eminent co-sponsors from governments, organizations, as well as the private sector, all participants. Let me begin by thanking each and every one of you for accepting our invitation and for making time to join us at this important conference on sustainable blue economy. Let me take this opportunity on behalf of all Kenyans to please feel very, very, very much at home amongst us, and as we say in Swahili, Karibuni Kenya. Ladies and gentlemen, it is with great pleasure that I join you all at this historic gathering that seeks to harness the promise and address the vulnerabilities of the blue economy. Like all of you, I am excited by the enormous economic prospects of the blue economy. However, at the same time, I am also deeply concerned about the challenges of sustainable use of this critical resource. The blue economy binds us to a common destiny. Oceans are at the heart of our planet. They contain 97% of the Earth's water supply, nearly half the oxygen that we breathe, absorb over a quarter of the carbon dioxide we produce, and regulate the weather as well as temperature. Further, oceans, seas, and lakes support livelihoods, food security, and nutrition, as well as employment. 90% of maritime trade and transportation are counteract the impacts of climate change as our carbon reservoirs. Unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, we have paid inadequate attention to the impact of human action on the health and productivity of our waters. As a result, many of our ocean systems are under immense stress. Their ability to act as a climate regulator and as a key engine for economic growth and sustainable development is progressively being eroded. We are already feeling the impact of plastics in oceans. The 8 million tons of plastics that enter the sea each year are transformed into microplastics that enter into our food chain and impact ecosystems as well as animal and human health worldwide. We are already experiencing the impact of climate change, which risks triggering rising temperatures that would flood and destroy large sections of our coastal economies. But we have also, in the same period, witnessed how progressive actions by some countries represented here to sustainably use, nurture, and protect maritime resources, Canada and Seychelles are good examples, and how these countries have been enabled to develop vibrant, diversified, and inclusive economies. So, we have convened here today to commit to innovate and use transformative ways for using us in a sustainable manner, our oceans, seas, lakes, and rivers. And we know, unless our environmental riches are protected, there can be no lasting prosperity for any of us. But such action must be collective. 2/3 of global waters lie beyond national jurisdiction. Action in one sea will have a positive or negative effect on other seas. Success in managing our global aquatic resources for sustainable global development therefore critically hinges on us working together. And to this end, I am here to join you as I also make our pledge as Kenya. I am convinced that for the sake of present and future generations, and for the continued viability of our ecosystems, we have to envision a different future, and therefore a different model for the blue economy. I pledge to envision that future and to do my part to promote it. I make the pledge in recognition of the need to first adopt appropriate policies, strategies, and mechanisms to harness the blue economy, to re-energize our national economies, and to create greater opportunities and jobs for our people. Secondly, to confront head-on the challenges of waste management and plastic pollution that is compromising the health of our people and oceans, seas, as well as rivers, but also threatening food security and the biodiversity on land and at sea. Third, to ensure responsible and sustainable fishing, to conserve the endangered species and high-value fish stocks on which millions of people depend for their livelihood. Number four, to ensure safety and security in the high seas so that global trade, connectivity, and all businesses can thrive unhindered and unfettered. On the basis of these imperatives, I pledge that in Kenya, I will lead from the front. First, as a government, we will take steps to build on and expand institutional governance mechanisms that are already in place to enhance coordinated management of the blue economy. These include the Blue Economy Implementation Standing Committee, as well as state departments for fisheries, maritime logistics, and transport. Secondly, we will and are taking measures to revive our maritime transport by building and expanding our ports and shipping facilities and partnering with global shipping lines to revive our maritime transport by building and expanding our ports and shipping facilities and partnering with global shipping lines to revive our maritime transport by building and expanding our ports and shipping facilities and partnering with global shipping lines to revive our maritime transport by building and expanding our ports and shipping facilities and partnering with global shipping lines to revive our maritime transport by building and expanding our ports and shipping facilities and partnering with global shipping lines to revive our maritime transport by building and expanding our ports and shipping facilities and partnering with global shipping lines to revive our maritime transport by building and expanding our ports and shipping facilities and partnering with global shipping lines to revive our maritime transport by building and expanding our ports and shipping facilities and partnering with global shipping lines revive our maritime transport by building and expanding our ports and shipping facilities and partnering with global shipping lines revive our maritime transport by building and expanding our ports and shipping facilities and partnering with global shipping lines revive our maritime transport by building and expanding our ports and shipping facilities and partnering with global shipping lines revive our maritime transport by building and expanding our ports and shipping facilities and partnering with global shipping lines revive our maritime transport by building and expanding our ports and shipping facilities and partnering with global shipping lines revive our maritime transport by building and expanding our ports and shipping facilities and partnering with global shipping lines revive our maritime transport by building and expanding our ports and shipping facilities and partnering with global shipping lines revive our maritime transport.
Thank you very much. Your Excellencies, Honorable Ministers, distinguished heads of delegation, ladies and gentlemen, may I now introduce a video highlighting Theme 1 of the Sustainable Blue Economic Conference, People, Culture, thank you very much, and Societies. Your Excellencies, inclusive, Honorable Ministers, economy, distinguished heads of delegation, ladies and gentlemen, may I now introduce a video highlighting Theme 1 of the Sustainable Blue Economic Conference, People, Culture, thank you very much, and Society. Your Excellencies, inclusive, Honorable Ministers, economy, distinguished heads of delegation, ladies and gentlemen, may I now introduce a video highlighting Theme 1 of the Sustainable Blue Economic Conference, People, Culture, thank you very much, and Society, Your Excellencies, inclusive Honorable Ministers, distinguished heads of delegation, ladies and gentlemen. May I now introduce a video highlighting theme 1 of the Sustainable New Economic Conference. People, culture, thank you very much, and Society, Your Excellencies, inclusive Honorable Ministers, distinguished heads of delegation, ladies and gentlemen. May I now introduce a video highlighting theme 1 of the Sustainable New Economic Conference. People, culture, thank you very much, and Society, Your Excellencies, inclusive Honorable Ministers, distinguished heads of delegation, ladies and gentlemen. May I now introduce a video highlighting theme 1 of the Sustainable New Economic Conference. People, culture, thank you very much, and Society, Your Excellencies, inclusive Honorable Ministers, distinguished heads of delegation, ladies and gentlemen. May I now introduce a video highlighting theme 1 of the Sustainable New Economic Conference. People, culture, thank you very much, and Society, Your Excellencies, inclusive Honorable Ministers, distinguished heads of delegation, ladies and gentlemen. May I now introduce a video highlighting theme 1 of the Sustainable New Economic Conference. People, culture, thank you very much, and Society, Your Excellencies, inclusive Honorable Ministers, distinguished heads of delegation, ladies and gentlemen. May I now introduce a video highlighting theme 1 of the Sustainable